This segment of the Chapter 10 lecture is titled Nation, Section, and Party. And the focus question is, what were the major areas of conflict between nationalism and sectionalism? Between 1810 and 1822, Spain's Latin American colonies rebelled and established independent nations, including Mexico, Venezuela, Ecuador, and Peru. By 1825, Spain's empire in the Western Hemisphere contained only Cuba and Puerto Rico. Americans sympathized with these Republican revolutions, and the United States was the first to recognize these new governments. Important parallels existed between the Spanish American revolutions and the United States War for Independence, primarily that they were precipitated by imperial attempts to raise more revenue out of colonies. The Spanish government had been trying to strengthen its hold over the empire since the late 18th century. Napoleon invaded Spain in 1808, and in 1812, a constitution was adopted that granted more localized control to colonies. When the king was restored in 1814, he revoked the constitution and attempted to reassert imperial control. As in the British colonies, local elites demanded status and equality. Declarations of independence in Spanish colonies resembled the United States Declaration, such as Venezuela's 1811 document that employed language strikingly similar to Jefferson's. Unlike the British colonies, however, the Spanish Empire was too vast and disconnected for common nationhood, and it dissolved into 17 independent countries. While communication and printing in the Spanish territories was scarce, imported literature spread the era's revolutionary ideas. In some ways, the Latin American constitutions that emerged were more democratic than the United States Constitution. Most attempted to create a single national people out of diverse populations, and therefore extended the right to vote to blacks and American Indians. While black soldiers fought on both sides of revolutionary conflicts, which set gradual abolition of slavery in motion, the Latin American wars tended to last longer and were often followed by periods of destructive civil war. The result was greater difficulty achieving economic development than in the United States. John Quincy Adams, Monroe's Secretary of State, feared that Spain might try to regain its former colonies, and in 1823 he drafted a speech for the president that became known as the Monroe Doctrine. This doctrine stated that the United States would oppose any future efforts by European powers to colonize the Americas, would abstain from involvement in Europe's wars, and would prevent European nations from interfering in the new Latin American nations. This doctrine assumed that the Old and New World were separate political and diplomatic systems, and claimed for the United States the role of the dominant power in the Western Hemisphere. Adams also meant to secure the commerce of the region for U.S. interests as opposed to British. In the 1824 presidential election, the only candidate with nationwide support was Andrew Jackson, known for his military victories. The other candidates, John Quincy Adams of Massachusetts, William Crawford of Georgia, and Henry Clay of Kentucky, found support mostly in their regions. Though Jackson received the largest tally of the popular vote and carried all regions except for New England, none of the candidates received a majority of the Electoral College votes. Running last and eliminated, Henry Clay used his influence to lead the House of Representatives into electing John Quincy Adams, who Clay believed would promote the American system. Clay was soon appointed Secretary of State. This appointment led to charges that a corrupt bargain between Clay and Adams had secured the presidency for Adams and laid the basis for the emergence of a Democratic Party behind Andrew Jackson's candidacy in the 1828 election. The alliance around Adams and Clay came to form the opposition Whig Party in the 1830s. John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, the second president, came from a privileged background and had experience as a diplomat and senator in the U.S. Congress. Despite his uncharismatic nature, John Quincy Adams was strongly nationalist. He supported the American system of government-sponsored economic development. As the author of the Monroe Doctrine, Adams also wanted to increase American commerce and power in the Western Hemisphere, and hoped that the United States would eventually incorporate Canada, Cuba, and part of Mexico. Adams had a much larger view of federal power than many at the time. He thought the federal government should direct and sponsor internal improvements such as roads and canals, pass laws to promote agriculture, manufacturing, and the arts, and establish a national university and naval academy. At a time when many Americans believed government power threatened freedom, Adams argued that liberty is power. His ideas horrified believers in strict construction who wanted a limited role for the federal government, and Congress approved few of his programs. Some of his ideas, such as a national university and the adoption of the metric system of measurements, have yet to be implemented. Adams rallied an opposition around Andrew Jackson dedicated to individual liberty, states' rights, and limited government. Jackson's campaign, organized by Martin Van Buren, a New York senator, started immediately after Adams took office. While Adams typified an old politics in which elites ruled, Van Buren, the son of a tavern keeper, represented a new era in American politics in which ordinary men could become party managers and professionals and wield great power. Van Buren believed political parties and party competition were legitimate and good for the Republic by checking the power of administrations and offering voters choices. He also believed parties would suppress sectionalism by bringing together supporters and candidates from all across the country. Van Buren was alarmed by the sectionalism inspired by the slavery question in the Missouri debates, and he hoped to resurrect the Jeffersonian alliance between Southern planters and Northern farmers and urban workers. By 1828, Van Buren had established the political apparatus of the Democratic Party, with local and state units overseen by a national committee and newspapers devoted to the party. Adams disdained political organization, refused to dismiss federal office holders who campaigned for Jackson, and really did little to promote his own reelection. Outside of a commitment to limited government, Jackson's campaign made very few promises, but instead relied on his popularity and party machinery. Jackson's supporters disdained Adams' intellectual attainments and accused him of having mistresses while serving as a diplomat in Europe, while simultaneously praising Jackson's frontier manliness. Jackson's opponents condemned his having executed army deserters and questioned the morality of his wife Rachel for marrying him before her divorce was final. Jackson blamed the scandal for her death shortly after the election. By 1828, voters, rather than legislatures, chose electors in all states except for South Carolina, which helped to encourage campaigning and high voter turnout. Jackson won an astounding victory, carrying the entire South and West, as well as Pennsylvania. The election was the first to demonstrate how universal white male suffrage had transformed American politics, and for better or worse, the United States entered the age of Jackson.